First of all, we're Words After Dark. We are a creative coalition of authors that write together. I'm Ace Layden, the author.
I am Alexa Windsor. I am a horror and mystery writer.
I'm Ann Mouse, and I guess I'm also a fantasy author, I guess, question mark. So the thing that's weird about this panel is it's basically just Alexa's show. We're here for moral support and also with anecdotes, but
to make sure that I make sense.
yes. But largely, this is all about you.
I put this panel together because as we were gathering people in the Words After Dark, Writers Coalition, I was seeing, people who were struggling with their craft, and I myself struggle with my craft. Basically, in feeling like I can actually put words onto the page, and in feeling writer's block in general. And really, it isn't just writers that struggle from this. People across the board on all mediums, they might have trouble feeling like they're worthy to put, words down on the page or create art. Even in academic writing, people struggle with being able to feel like they're putting their ideas down right. So I would like to say that writer's block itself and artist block is not a new thing. It's been felt throughout history. I do have an article here. I'll turn the laptop around so that you can see at least this. It was an article written in 1967 that was a concise self-treatment about writer's block. And as you can see, it is nothing. The person was writing about how writer's block affected them. And it's nothing. So this is not a modern phenomenon. Basically how this is going to go down is that I wanted to talk about what goes on in your brain when you're feeling times of resistance or struggle. Because we think of this as a mental thing, but it turns out that there are processes in your brain that work to make you feel this block, to make you feel this resistance. So we're going to start talking about that. I'm going to kind of talk lecture style for about 30 or 40 minutes, and then we'll kind of leave time 10 minutes for questions and all that. But I just want to make sure that we have time to kind of say all we want to.
Also, it's worth noting that these slides will be made available on like all of the Words After Dark media. You'll be able to find your way back to the slides. And also, this is going to end up being recorded and posted. So if you have a question with something that's not answered, or something you don't understand, you can always find us and ask us afterwards. And if there's something that you wanted to make note of but you didn't get a chance to, you'll be able to find this information, so don't panic.
Yes, you can't see the slides here because I didn't realize this thing needed a power input, but you can see the slides when we make them available. So resistance in itself.
Excuse me, you're not supposed to be in this panel till 3 p.m.
No, not this one.
Oh, that solved itself. So resistance, I'm kind of basing this off of my own experience with creative block. So if you are an artist, kind of take my words and apply it to your own lives. But when I experience writer's block, I feel that kind of halting, I don't even want to sit at the laptop or sit at the computer, and I find it really hard to even start typing, or I'll think that what I have is garbage, and I won't want to come back and revisit it. And it kind of manifests itself in a lot of different ways. Either you want to write, don't know where to start or what, you'll say to yourself, oh, someday I'll work on that project. Your house gets cleaner closer to your deadline because you're just kind of working on everything else, kind of putting it off until the last minute. Or some people find that they'll edit a piece that they have over and over because they don't feel worthy or able to present it. And another word for it is procrastination, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well. The good side is that resistance is not laziness. It's not a lack of willpower. It's not the failure of yours for intellect or lack of imagination on your part, but it's about neurology. It's about what's happening in your brain. But when we know what's happening in our brain, at least when I started studying what's happening in our brain, it gave me a base. It was comforting for me to know, hey, this isn't just a fault of mine. This is something that could potentially be fixed. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Okay.
makes a lot of sense because it's really easy to fall into the mindset of, oh, this is a personal issue that only I struggle with, and it's like my fault.
Yeah.
And it's good to know that that's not the case, and also that there's things that you can do to make it less of a problem. That is what you're getting.
Yeah, yeah. So I wanted to talk a bit about what's happening in our brains. So if you think about when you do an action or if you have a thought, the neurons in your brain are flying along pathways. They're called neural pathways. And the more you have a thought or the more you do something over and over in a habit, it's building up something called a myelin sheath. It's like an insulation around that pathway. And the more you do it, the thicker that sheath becomes. So, the thicker the sheath, the harder it's going to be to break from that habit. Which is why even just taking a different route to work can be a little bit startling or a little bit more hard than you would think. In this case, it's hard when you're so used to not writing or you're so used to writing a certain genre. It can be hard to break out of that shell that you created for yourself. It's because the neurons in your brain are literally not used to diverting from that path. So there is actually a biological explanation for why habits develop and why it can be so hard to make a new habit. Now, I wish it were easy to switch. I wish there was a switch in your brain that you could literally turn on. And there's a pros and cons for that. The pro is that good habits are hard to break. You want to keep the good habits. You don't want it to be simple for that good habit to switch off. But that also makes it hard to create a good habit from the bad habit. There is kind of an analogy that would make it easier to understand. If you're used to walking trails in a forest or in a mountain, you think of the well-beaten path where hundreds of people have gone on before you. If there's a particularly an area with rough terrain, then the people will have kind of walked a very narrow, a very deep path, and it could be very hard to walk that. That's kind of like a bad habit right there.
I think you're both in it.
Okay, there's sense. It can be hard to walk that path, and it would be a great idea to get out of that, terrain, but it's painful. And I know that it's painful to get out of bad habits. But the good thing is it's possible. Brains are highly plastic things. And if you've heard about brains, how they stop changing after childhood, and when you hit 25, at least that's what I heard as I was nearing 25, and they were saying, oh, this is how you're going to be for the rest of your life. And I was like, no, I don't want that. It continues well into adulthood. Brains can change well into adulthood. New habits can be formed. So we have, how many of you have heard of the flight or flight response? Okay. All the hands. The fight or flight response is something that happens in our limbic system. It's basically a response that kicks in when our brain detects a threat to our safety and well-being, either physically or emotionally. I remember when a couple of weeks ago, I took my cat out on supervised outings, and she was chasing snakes, and I couldn't see what she was chasing at first. I go over there, and I just see the grass slithering and moving when something, goes through it. And I had a moment where I was just like, and I actually leapt 5 feet up in the air. And then I came back down, and I was like, why did I do that? I could see that it was just a tiny snake. It's not a huge threat. But that's a result of the limbic system, perceiving something that could be, potentially deadly. It doesn't know if it's a huge threat or a little threat. It's just going to react immediately. If we get badly criticized or insulted for our work, or if we see that other people are being badly criticized for their work, and we anticipate it in our own heads, the limbic system kicks in with that same fight or flight response. And it's going to remember this is something that is a threat to us emotionally. And so it's going to kick in. If it kicks in multiple times, it becomes a habit because of those neural pathways and those myelin sheaths that we discussed before. And we don't realize that this is happening. But it's literally your brain's trying to protect itself from that perceived bad criticism and that perceived threat to your well-being. And so that's something that's really important to remember, is that it's not just you. It's literally your brain trying to protect you.
I was going to say, it's also worth remembering that your brain is not trying to be bad. It's inconveniencing you, but it's doing it because it wants you to survive.
Yes. So when I mentioned in my story that just after leaping back from that tiny snake, my brain kicked in and went, well, why did I do that? That's something called the cerebral cortex kicking in. The cerebral cortex is basically what makes you, you. It's the part of you that understands language, numbers. It helps you remember, your memories. It plans for the future. When the limbic system takes over and gives you that fight or flight response, the cortex then kicks back in and says, well, that isn't something I decided to do. What happened there? And it'll make up an excuse to try to explain that behavior. And those stories can sound like, oh, I'm not doing this because I'm lazy. I'm not doing this because I'm undisciplined. Maybe I don't really want to write. Maybe I'm afraid of success. Maybe I'm afraid that when I put out this good story and everybody likes it, how am I going to follow up with, that with another story? So the cortex wants like novelty. It wants you to be creative. That's the part of you that goes, hey, this is a really good idea. I want to present that to the world. But the limbic system wants to keep you alive, and it can't understand the difference between, hey, this isn't going to kill you, to, oh my gosh, that's a snake that's going to bite you and you'll die. So
that's how you get those like knee-jerk reactions of like what you described, and then the result is you get your brain telling you that no, I did this consciously, because it doesn't like to admit that you're not in full control of yourself all the time.
And it's one of the reasons why receiving even measured feedback can be very hard, because your brain is already prepping you for that to be a conflict, for that to be a problem.
Mm-hmm. So we kind of go from that into perfectionism, because perfectionism is setting the standard by which your limbic system operates and your cortex operates. This can manifest in the all or nothing mentality. This must be perfect with no mistakes. Everyone needs to love it, or it's not worth it to even begin writing it. You either go in and it's perfect on the rough draft, or I just don't want to start.
Which doesn't happen, by the way.
It never happens. Nobody ever experiences this. The fear or anxiety produced by knowing that the finished project might not be perfect results in the creator not wanting to get started. Case in point, me getting ready for this panel. I had all of these ideas floating through my head, and I was trying to anticipate putting it all together and wanting it to be, this.
When did you make the slideshow?
What?
When did you make the slideshow?
I made the slideshow in the last couple of days.
We've known about this panel since last Midwest.
Yes. Well, I had my ideas, and I didn't want to put it together because I wanted it to be perfect, and now I can't even show it because my power is. The saving grace is that it will be available later, like we said, so. It will be seen by human eyes eventually. But, huh?
Do we not have human eyes?
You don't right now.
Oh, I
Yeah.
do.
So there is a difference between striving for excellence and demanding perfection of yourself.
So one thing I want to touch on before we move on is I think perfectionism is something that's really easy to fall into just because, especially for creative arts, because we see other people doing great things and producing great things, but a lot of the time you don't see all of the work and all of the struggle and everything that went into those projects, and we kind of tend to pull that into ourselves and, oh, they made something great and they didn't seem like they had to work for it, why is this so hard for me? And that's not really how it goes. Everyone struggles with it.
And the thing about having that as a measure of success, that something has to be perfect, is you can create a perfect work and nobody can know about it. And it will still feel like a failure because it's gone unrecognized. So on many levels, it's not only unattainable, but even the idea of it can't, it's not enough to sustain itself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There are blogs out there that collect pictures of the classical writers' rough drafts. And you can see them online. They are all marked up. They have comments galore. They have entire sections slashed out. So, like I said, this is not a modern thing. And when you see classics being recognized in schools, and fine arts, that's just because you're seeing the finished product of everything that's gone on before it.
And some of them are terrible.
And some of them are terrible.
Sorry.
That's a different panel.
Oh, that is Sunday.
So when you become obsessive over something like this, you may not even recognize it. You're just unconsciously setting these unrealistically high demands for yourself. You're rewriting one section over and over. You're refusing to accept the necessity of moving forward with an imperfect draft. But being unwilling to trust the process and ignoring the reality that all ideas go through awkward stages before they're fully developed. That's something that you need to recognize. Because everyone, like we said, does go through that awkward stage.
Ideas are basically people, and they all have to go through puberty. That's the way it works.
And I wanted to show you a real stage of procrastination right here. I'll finish writing that slide later.
This is the most Alexa thing I've ever seen.
So, a lot of what I experienced in school growing up was getting an assignment and leaving it until the last minute to write it. You kind of finish the assignment the night before, turn it in with little to no editing. The assignment returns with mediocre to good grades, or conversely, the student doesn't care what grades come back. So you get the result that you wanted. There's no reason to correct this behavior, so it continues. The myelin sheaths around those same neural pathways that led to this are getting stronger and stronger throughout years of that behavior going on. So now it's harder to break out of the habit of procrastination in your daily life. So then we can talk about failure. And I kind of wanted at one point to have that Super Smash Brothers, voice clip of going, failure. So it's the anticipation of failure and the disappointment that we know that we're going to feel. What?
Oh, no, it's not.
No, okay. Okay. So it's anticipation of failure and the disappointment from ourselves that triggers that fight or flight response, either from past personal experience or observing others who have failed, like I said before. The limbic system is just trying to protect you from the perceived probability of the failure. This fosters shame in yourself. You're both ashamed because you're afraid that your work is going to be bad, or that people are going to think it's bad, and then you're also ashamed because you're not working on the thing. And if you were a good writer, you would be working on the thing.
That's also the most you thing I've ever heard.
So you've got guilt coming from two different angles, and they're both just terrible. The good thing is that failure is not to be feared. You can have consequences with failing to meet a deadline, but failure is a result. It is not the desired result, but it is a result. You can learn from that result and change the process to see if things would be different. So you don't have to think about a failure of not completing a book by such and such a date, like you were telling yourself for years that you would. You didn't do it, but it's okay. You still have time. And you can kind of see, why wasn't I working on that up until now? Was I feeling nervous? Was I just not giving myself enough time to work? If it helps you distance yourself emotionally, you can even use if-then statements. Kind of look at it from a logical angle. If I was having trouble on it because I was feeling tired from work every day after I came home, and I just didn't have the energy to work on it, would it be easier to maybe work on it in the morning? If I am having trouble working on my thing at home, could I go to the library? I have a lot of success going to the library and being able to kind of focus on something.
This comes down again to your neural pathways thing, because a lot of times when you're setting work for yourself, you don't sit around your house and do work, you sit around your house and relax. So both Ace and I have found this as well, that getting out of your house and going to a place to do work that is not a workplace, like a library or like a coffee shop where you sit down and dedicate yourself to that, can make good habits.
Mm-hmm. And you're retraining your brain, because your brain will then kind of form a new pathway at the library. Myelin sheath guides into work. So you can, kind of thinking of it as even, making a chart. You can chart your own neural pathways if that's what will kind of help you envision this thing better.
I think another way to look at failure is in almost every single creative pursuit, any amount of work that you're doing is practice. And even if you don't produce something that you want to share with the world, you're practicing. And that is worth something.
Creativity is a muscle. With practice, you improve the muscle. You can't expect yourself physically to go out and immediately be able to lift 500 pounds. Why would you expect of yourself to immediately sit down and be able to write the best American novel, or, complete this presentation or this TV show or this audio drama and expect it to be perfect the first time? There were a series of quotes that I wanted to kind of leave up on the board, but I will mention, who here has heard of The Room? The Room by Tommy Wiseau.
You're tearing me apart.
You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
So, Greg Sestero, who played Mark in that film, he was Tommy Wiseau's friend. He said, "Is success simply a matter of what one does with failure? Everyone who looks at The Room objectively will say that it's a terrible film, and they'll question why it was made. But if you look at the cult following that it has and how much money that it has made over time, is it a failure? A lot of people have seen it. People are still watching it."
If it brings someone joy, can it really be considered a failure?
Yeah.
Even if it only brings one person joy, and even if that one person is only you, can it be considered a failure?
Considering writing for yourself, even if you're too nervous to write for other people, writing for yourself is very powerful. It can even be kind of a therapy for yourself.
It's 1,000% therapy. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's 1,000% therapy.
Is that why half of us do it? That's definitely.
I would argue that you should only write for yourself.
You are your first
you should write
audience.
for yourself first. If you're writing for other people, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Unless they're paying you. Up front.
That's kind of part of the reason why I personally like self-publishing my books so much and going through Amazon, is because you don't have an editor with a traditional publishing company telling you what you can and can't put in your book. I personally like the freedom of being able to put in what I enjoy. Now, again, that's for another panel, the pros and cons of having traditional publisher versus self-publishing, but I thought I would kind of add that in there. So now we're going to talk about how to apply this knowledge of the neural pathways, perfectionism, failure, to your own lives. What can you do to actually break out of some bad habits that you may have? One is choosing a writing time and then sticking to it. It again starts rerouting the neural pathways in your brain for sitting down. Okay, now I'm going to write. And that's a very powerful thing. And like I mentioned before, if a time is not working for you, you don't have to stick to it. Choose another time. See if that works better. Is it before work? Is it after work? Is it 1 a.m.? Because some of our greatest ideas come to us at 1 a.m. before night owls.
There's a reason we're called Words After Dark.
Words After Dark. There's something I like to call 15-minute magic. Make a commitment to only spend 15 minutes on something. If you don't spend more on that, that's okay. You just said that you were going to sit there for 15 minutes and think about writing, even if nothing appeared on the page. Like you just sat there, opened the Word document, and then just kind of stared at it. You made an attempt.
You fulfilled that promise to yourself.
You fulfilled that promise to yourself.
That's still a success.
And if you find that you're sitting down and you spend an hour, you spend 2 hours on it. Great. The next day, you sit down, you only spend 15 minutes, nothing appears. That's okay. You kept your promise. You kept your commitment. So it's just 15 minutes, day after day, of sitting down and kind of rerouting the pathways. That's what you want to go for. Another way that helps me is keeping a journal, either a personal journal or a writing journal. Keep track of your progress. Keep track of your feelings as you're trying to sit down and work on something. What's on your mind? What would you like to work on? Another thing, put down the phone and put down the internet. And I'll tell you why. When you look at Facebook or you look at your phone, your brain gives off a chemical. And one of these is called dopamine. And when you get your dopamine fix, your brain feels good. It's doing what it enjoys. Why would it want to do anything else? And if you do that again and again, that's training through the myelin sheaths. So you want to not only put down the phone, you want to fill that time in with something that you're going to enjoy. If you don't like what you're working on, your brain is going to go, why would I want to do that when this feels good? Why would it want to do that when it's getting its dopamine fix? So you want ultimately to enjoy what you're working on. Our brains are just junkies. It's a perfect way to put it.
It's all about the drugs.
There are kind of apps and methods that we can do to help us focus. One of them is Pomodoro timers, and I have all of these listed down on the slides. Pomodoro timers, there's something called the Thrive phone app, which I like because you can schedule what it will switch off. And what it'll kind of, it kind of puts a screensaver on it. There are internet blockers, and there's an app called Cold Turkey, which works on your desktop. And it'll kind of restrict internet access to stuff like Internet Explorer or Firefox. And so it'll kind of put on that last stop, are you sure you want to go back to the internet? And that'll kind of force you to check yourself. I told myself I was going to sit and try to work on my writing or try to work on my art during this 15-minute time. After the 15 minutes is over, I can do whatever I want. Like I said before with the journaling, keeping a daily log of even just things that you do in your life. I spent an hour on work. I spent an hour making myself dinner. Just kind of keep track of what you do during your daily life, just to kind of see where you could schedule in that 15 minutes of writing time. And also positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement. I'm not trying to compare humans to dogs, but I was a dog walker for 3 years. I have seen how positive reinforcement works a lot better than negative reinforcement. I have tried to do the thing where I'm like, okay, I have to work or else I can't get ice cream. And then I'm very good at ignoring my guilt and I get ice cream anyway.
You have to do it the other way. You have to go, okay, the ice cream is a treat, therefore I'm going to work and then I will reward myself with ice cream.
Mm-hmm. So I've seen kind of the good stuff of positive reinforcement. You want this to be a reward for yourself. You want to associate good feelings with your writing so that you can build up those neural pathways and those myelin sheets. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some physical obstacles that come with writing. There are injuries like strain, carpal tunnel. Somebody came up to one of our panels and said, what would you advise to a writer with dyslexia? And I wish I had been able to hear the question. I was talking with somebody else at the time. I would have recommended voice to text. Most phones and software come with a voice to text option. And I have used this for a lot of my writing just because I find creativity and being able to put down my ideas comes a little bit better when I go through audio. I listen to a lot of audiobooks and I write a lot of things in voice to text just because that's how my brain works. It's kind of like with those differences in learning capabilities that we hear throughout school. Some people are visual, some people are more audio. So you can even experiment with a lot of those things and see if it comes easier for you. If you're an artist, are you better with physical putting paint down, or are you better with digital? You might even consider swapping around sometimes and seeing if that kind of opens up new pathways. If you find that your work, like even with all of these tips that we give you, you might just try something that you enjoy. Kind of separate yourself from your work, pick up some clay, mold the clay, become a kid again. What did you enjoy when you were a kid? So, did you want to?
I wanted to make a brief note on the injuries and strain front because I have strain injuries in both my arms and in both my hands, and this makes writing really hard for me sometimes, which is kind of terrible because it's what I live for. There are pictures of me on Instagram with heating pads on my arms after I finished a novel draft. It's terrible. If you ever took a keyboarding class, your teacher told you to stretch your hands and you didn't because you didn't think it mattered, it matters. Because I'm facing now the fact that one of these days I'm going to have to rely on voice to text to write books. Because eventually one day I'm going to wake up, my arms won't work. Take it seriously. Do your stretches. Take your breaks from the computer. Because it sucks. It's terrible. And you can do these small things and really have them extend the usage that you get out of your body. Stand up, stretch your neck, stretch your hands, and all of these things will make the experience a lot less grating on you. Please do it. like take my horror story as a warning, like take it seriously.
Back to Alexa's point about the like potentially taking a break from your like what you're used to doing. Even if it's just re-examining why you like writing about what you like writing about, like what it is about this project that you like. Take a step back from the project, examine those things, and then maybe take it a different direction. Maybe a change of pace is what you need.
So we wanted to talk about some self-care strategies that you can do. When you exercise your body, you're exercising your brain, and go figure this is where your ideas are coming from. This is where your writing and your art is coming from, this organ that's in your head. So it goes to figure, when you take care of your body, you're taking care of your mind. So when they tell you all of those health tips about eating right and sleeping, we are Words After Dark, but we do recommend you get, a proper amount of sleep that works for you. If you get enough sleep, you're going to find that it kind of ups your game. Actually, when we first fall asleep, that's when your memories are being made. That's when your brain goes through your day and makes memories from that day, just before you go to sleep. So if you're filling it with the things that you want to be creative and you things that you want your brain to remember, then your brain is going to make memories out of it.
If you don't sleep, also, it makes you dumb. Like you just will not produce quality work. Your brain will be tired. It will not string words together properly. If you're an artist, like coordination just won't be up there. It makes you stupid. Go to bed. Drink water.
Go to bed. Drink water.
Really?
This is a PSA.
Go to sleep, drink water, don't be dumb.
Yes.
All.
Now, this is also a very generalized view of the problem. I could take like an entire series of seminars explaining how anxiety and depression and how ADHD affects the creative process.
How did you get access to all of my diagnoses?
And it just kind of, it all leads back to how does the brain work with these mental illnesses? With depression, there are genuinely, if you were to look at an MRI scan of a brain of a person suffering with depression and the brain of a normal, healthy person, normal, that's a myth.
Statistically average.
Yes. There are genuinely areas of the brain that don't light up. They don't get the stimulation like the average brain does. So it's that much harder to form neural pathways. So it's not your fault. It's just that your brain works a little bit differently. And that's when it's okay to go out and get the help that you need. Or if you suffer from anxiety, if you suffer from just feeling like the world is going to crash down around you at any moment, of course you're going to, have more instances of that fight or flight feeling. And it's going to be that much more terrifying for you.
No one produces quality work when they're suffering.
Mm-hmm.
There's this like myth that goes around and say, oh, artists are miserable. Yeah, that might be a thing, but you make better work when you're not. Like, it's inarguable. You make it better, you make it faster, you enjoy it more. There gets to be a point where focusing on productivity is the wrong answer. If your mental health is getting in the way of you getting things done, it might be time to set those things aside and focus just on making your brain suck less and making life hard for you. And that's fine, because all those goals will still be there when you're having the easier time of it. So that's the thing that you have to do. Like, you don't have to feel bad about it.
Alright, so...
Oh, I wanted to hit up one thing quick from the last
Sure.
time. The other thing I have a note on here is humor as a coping mechanism. Because if you are a creator with either the usual creator suffering or mental illness suffering, chances are there are hilarious jokes on the internet that help you, or at least make you feel better. There's a downside to that. Reinforcing that situation with humor makes you less inclined to change it.
Mile and cheese.
Yeah. So I don't bring this up to like dampen your joy next time you find a hilarious meme. Share it, laugh, but also consider.
Oh, we're tracking you.
Hit the green button.
Consider what laughing about it does for you and whether or not you should be focusing more of your energy on actually tackling the problem.
I think we are good with the kind of lecture round. Now's the time we're going to open out to take some questions. If you are interested in any recommended reading, I do have a slide up here. If you want to look at it, during this time or after the panel, these are a lot of the books that I've been studying and where I've been getting my information from. But at this time, feel free to ask some questions.
So I have bipolar disorder, and I kind of swing into mania more often than I swing into anything else. When I'm in mania, that's when I'm my most productive, but I also have really shitty work during that time. So is there anything, like, you guys could have any tips that I could use, like, if I can try to get myself to start writing when I'm stable and not just when I'm manic and wanting to overthrow the government? So I write anarchy gay stories, like...
First of all, I'm here for the anarchy gay stories. I have attention deficit, so I get hyper-focused.
Yeah.
So, not quite the same, but I kind of have an idea of what you're dealing with. I'm actually going to recommend outlines.
Okay.
I know there's a devil. Everyone hates them. We hate them. But giving yourself that skeleton ahead of time to work with means that when you get like this and you want to do like 1,000 pounds of work, you have that to work with already. And chances are that having that background will make your work at least more usable at the end of it.
Yeah.
So that's my suggestion.
Something on outlines. These two are kind of great at doing chronological outlines and kind of putting it together from beginning to end.
There's lots of different kinds of outlines, so even though I suggest doing them, look around for the one that suits you best.
I personally work better from a broad, like put down the scenes that I have in mind, write it on a broad spectrum first, and then kind of going into more detail instead of just chronologically writing beginning to end. There are different methods like the snowflake method that could give you a more visual kind of look at the outline that you want. So, but yes, we here definitely condone outlines.
And then, could I also add something else? I've been through some shit in my life. I find myself writing about those experiences and making stories around what I've experienced in my life. Do you guys think that's a good idea? Like,
therapy.
It is a good idea.
Right.
It's not a good idea. It's a good idea because we all need to process things that we've been through. Writing is one of the ways that we can help provide catharsis to ourselves for our experiences. It's very useful for that. But if it goes too far, it can become a fixation.
Yeah.
And then it can be something that interferes with the rest of our lives. The only person who can draw that line is you. If you like those themes, and they're themes that you enjoy working with and enjoy exploring, do it. Because I'm sure someone else in the world will read that, and they will have the same kind of emotional experience and relief that you get from writing it. If you find that it's stopping you from branching out, if you find that you can't get your mind off these things, then it's probably good to look into things you can do to help relieve that burden from yourself.
Thank you guys.
Other hands?
Thoughts, questions, suggestions? Go ahead.
One thing that I kind of want to add, I heard about this just recently because I came off of school from an art history class, and they mentioned something about back in the Renaissance they didn't look as genius, that word, as like someone is that. It's like this ethereal thing that just kind of comes to you if you let that. And thinking about genius in that way instead of just being like, oh, this person has it all. It's more just like
inspiration.
Reframing can be very important. If you reframe genius as a thing that occasionally strikes someone, then it seems more attainable, or at least it seems less daunting. Because if somebody's like, oh, that thing you did, that was genius, then you go, okay, I don't have to live up to that.
Yeah.
Like, that was a momentary strike of brilliance, so it can relieve some of that fear.
Kind
That's a
of
good idea.
like what I said before, if you sit down for your 15 minutes and suddenly take 2 hours working on your thing because you're enjoying it, and then the next day you come back and nothing's coming, you had a strike of genius. You just aren't getting it today. That's okay. You could still put down something. Even if it's just what you're thinking about. Actually, a lot of what I do is when I'm sitting down and I don't really want to write on the project that I'm working on, I'll write about what I'm thinking of at the time. And that's okay. There's an exercise that somebody walked me through that was write down whatever word comes to your mind now. Wait 10 seconds. Write another word down. Could be anything. Okay, once you've done that 10 times, write down a sentence. Whatever sentence comes to mind. Write down another sentence. Write down a paragraph. It just kind of gets you in the habit of not second guessing yourself and putting something down. Because that, whatever, like if you're working on a project, you write something down, that can then be, usable in your piece.
That's where one of the big fails of perfectionism is, because you can't edit a blank page. You can edit like an entire novel full of garbage. I've done it a couple of times now. You can edit bad, but you can't edit nothing. But you have to get to the point of putting the words down on the page first, so that's not a bad idea.
Also, a lot of the time, at least I've found, when I'm writing something and I'm just going, oh, this is crap, this is going to take so much editing, I come back to it later, and it's not nearly as bad as I thought it was.
Just don't guilt yourself.
And don't delete anything.
Don't delete anything.
Back up everything.
Don't guilt yourself, because that's your worst enemy, and that's training your brain to think that you're a failure. But as we discussed, even failure is a result. Just change your process. Try something else.
Is that our warning?
That's our time.
Okay.
We have business cards.
Either that or that's my time running in.
We're out of time anyways. We've got
Yes.
business cards up here if you guys want to contact us and help find these slides online later.
Feel free to, my cards are over here, they have my contact information if you want to talk to me about how you feel is resistance in your block. My email is always open, so.
Yeah, we have other panels. Come and say hi. That's basically it. Thank you. Woo!